Hello. I hope everyone finds themselves on here with decent bandwidth. Um, my name is Anthony Bari, here to tackle a few things in our 1 hour session here. I'm going to give it just a second, and I hope everyone can hear me. So we're going to tackle specifically the No Light Factory EZ, the Colorista 4 effect, and the overlight effect utilizing the Adobe ecosystem, so either in Adobe After Effects or in Adobe Premiere. I will talk about a few things as far as technical and a few things as far as stylistic approaches. So we're actually going to do the effects. I'll show the effects in the technical way, but then I also want to showcase the stylistic way, which is kind of reverse engineering. So I will leave the questions and the chat open. Feel free to say hello on the chat. And without further ado, I'll just kind of step you through and show you some of the looks that I have here built and inside of my Premiere timeline. So I'm doing this demo primarily in Adobe Premiere. And again, you can do the same exact have the same exact experience inside of Adobe After Effects with the Red Giant suites. So let me just show you, just kind of stepping through here, just to give you an idea. This is what the stuff looks like, and this is all coming from. It was shot in RAW, but I used transcoded log video because a lot of the times, depending on whether you shoot your own stuff or if you work in a collaborative environment, sometimes you might be receiving 709 files or just simply have no idea what your starting point is and what the color space is. So the very first thing we're going to do is I'm going to step you through the guided color correction inside of the Colorista 4 effect. So let me go here and I'm going to twirl these down. I've made some little groups of my effects that I'm going to go through in this session, for this session particularly. So just to give you a quick background on myself, I work in documentary post, and I've done a ton of camera work, but I do a good balance of each, and every now and then I get out there and I go across the globe and shoot some stuff in Asia. I'm currently working on a project in Northeast Thailand that involves food and agriculture, and it's really, really amazing sunsets, lights, lens flares everywhere, and just kind of an ideal setup. Sometimes you point your camera anywhere and it looks beautiful. So let me show you, without further ado, let me just step through the Colorista effect. So I'm talking about Magic Bullet Colorista 4. As part of the Magic Bullet suite, but also available as a standalone effect. So I'm going to just grab this and drop it on my clip. And we will have, off the bat, you have the Colorista effect that'll pop up inside of your effect controls, but inside of Premiere and After Effects, you have the option for the extensions. And then you'll see Magic Bullet Colorista 4. And let me just quickly point out one thing before I even continue this. I just want to let you know that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out here at training@redgiant.com. So if I cover anything today, you can also request something custom or special for your group, kind of diving deeper into anything I covered today or for future sessions. So feel free to reach out here at training@redgiant.com, and I'll put that up again at the end. So I'm recording today's session, and this is the second time I'm doing this session today. The recording will be available, and if you want to share it with your team, feel free. You'll get the link after our session. So now inside of After Effects, it's not extensions, but it's just, I forgot what the panel pops up as, but anyway, it's another option under the window menu. You'll have another option to pull up the dashboard. So also the RG Universe dashboard is available. I have it on my other screen just so it doesn't cramp up my whole screen here, but kind of looks like a menu item, and you can kind of sort through here and you get a good visual on all of the universe effects and tools. So I'm just going to put it over here on my other screen for the time being, and I'll bring it back when we're using it. So let's go through the guided color correction utilizing Colorista 4. So I'll click guided color correction here in my effect controls, and let's just sort out our color space. Now, I'm going to do this the technical way the first time, and then I will give an example of when you actually do it the non-technical way and just literally what visually looks good to you. So I'm going to give you the creative advice. So for this, I'm just going to choose flat video, and I'm going to drag over. And as I'm doing this, by the way, you're going to see these blue lines here because my original video has a slightly different aspect. So I have black lines on the top, so that's what that is. And as I'm dragging here, basically as soon as the shadows, right, as soon as the shadows get crunched, that's what you're getting, this blue line. It's kind of showcasing what areas are getting crunched. So it's a little too cool. And maybe that's just too crunched. So they always have a recommended area, right, where the good middle ground is. But for this, I'll just leave it right about here, right? And so one thing you'll notice as I'm stepping through, I just did the color space and the black levels. Now I'm going to work on the high point of the image and the white levels, right? And this in particular has a lot of a really bright sky in the background. So when I slightly crank this up, you can see that I'm burning off some pixels here. It's not terrible to do that. You can always do an easy sky replacement inside of the Colorista effect, but I'm going to just drag this down a little bit. And honestly, it's okay to have your white level spike just a hair. Again, you can always map this out or key it out and replace your sky, or you know, just a little bit of this is not terrible. So now I'm just going to drag my midtones here, and you can see that I'm kind of darkening everything here, or I can kind of pump these up if I want to. But for this, I'm going to drag just a little bit above that line right there. And you can see also it gives you a visualization of this histogram. And when you do this, you'll also be able to see the trace that they recommend is right about here. So when you drag to that line, you're sitting in that same recommended trace, but you can also, you know, go above or below what the recommended values are. And none of this is permanent. These all turn into values that live inside of your effect controls, and you can always step back if you're not happy with even the color space. So you can adjust these as you go, just on this timeline here on the top, or I would say like these are kind of like pages on a questionnaire. So it's like a visual questionnaire. So I'll just click through, and then it also always gives you all this good advice as you're moving through. Do you want this more contrasty, or do you want this less contrasty? It's up to you. And you can do this with the idea of I am going to kind of flatten out my image versus I am going to add contrast and kind of calibrate it to where things look right. But you know, you have the option in here to, like I said, you're kind of either going to prep it to be almost finished, you know, to where you just add a little bit of seasoning, or I will show you the reverse engineering of this where we prep it to be slightly crunched, and we almost degrade our footage and then add some the overlight effect, so, or the flares. So let me just grab this, and I will drag this over here. I'll leave a little bit of contrast. You can see the contrast in here. And now, after doing the color space, setting the black levels, white levels, and midtones, and the contrast, now we work on the color of the image. And then we're going to pump up our saturation here, and you're going to see where all the colors live. They live within the warm range here, right between yellow and red, right? And they're all like, once I drag this out, you can see, just in case you didn't know how to read the scope, this is one way of cheating and reading the scope, is you can see exactly where things live, and you can see as I'm adding saturation how they look on this graph. So I'll add just a little bit, not too much, because I'm going to add this with a secondary effect. So now that I'm past the saturation, now you have the choice to, you can do somewhat of a white balance, right? And by picking a neutral gray in the image, or you can kind of cool off your image, or you can warm up your image. And if you look, here's another way of cheating, just in case. If you look at your vector scope here, when I'm dragging this down and cooling things off, if I wanted things to kind of live in the middle and be a little bit more neutral, right? Now I'm dragging towards cool, and you can see that they're balancing out. So now it's almost an even split between the warm and the cool, right? So if I drag this out, I can warm it up or I can cool it off. And then you see where things live inside here on your vector scope example. So if I were to drag this, I'm going to leave this kind of in the warm values. I'm okay with the way this looks. And then now it tells me, okay, this is where I was before, and this is where I am now. So after I have applied this effect and I have done the guided color correction, it takes me to this point right here. If I wanted to, I could step back here and I could change this to log and then go back here, and I get a slightly different result, because you can see with the log footage, your values will be scrubbed a little bit more potent, because just because it's that much more washed out. So when you're working with the log footage, everything will become a little bit more potent as you scrub your values, meaning all the numbers will be a little bit stronger when you're using the log profile versus the flat video. And it also applies a LUT after the fact. So for this, I'm going to leave this as flat video. I'll go to finished, and now you can also see my image changed by just adjusting my color space. I can see my color space here when it's flat video, right? You can see what it looks like after this whole questionnaire, right? And if I go back and change it to log, and then I go back to finished, now you can see it's changed and it's become a little bit more crunched. But for this one, I'm just going to go flip it back to flat video, go to finished, click finished, and now it applies it to my clip. Okay, so now that I've done this, if I scroll down, you'll notice, right, the temperature has been scrubbed. All these three right here have been adjusted, right? So this is my midtone right here on the outer part of this circle right here, right? So this tackles the saturation of each, right? And then this side right here is basically the 0 to 100 values on each one of these circles for highlights, midtones, and shadow. And then if I go in here, you can see, I'll scroll down some more. These saturation values have been adjusted. So anything that you have adjusted inside of that questionnaire when you did the guided color correction translates to values that live inside of your effect. So nothing is hidden, nothing is under the hood, and yes, you can adjust and change all of this after the fact. So, and it also, remember when I set my color space to flat video, it applied this pro lost flat LUT. And that's something that's in the effect itself. You do not have to go and search for a sidecar LUT. If you wanted to, you could import a LUT that you have. So if you receive something, from the camera, or somebody sent you something that they've already built that they like, and you just want to work with that and go around that, you can import that LUT as well. But the whole point is that when you finish your guided color correction based on the color space, now it's applied a LUT to kind of calibrate your footage. And again, this is just a starting point. So now that I've done this, there's a few things about color restyle I'll show you, but I do want to kind of sandwich this effect with the overlight effect, and I want to kind of give this a kind of this blooming highlights as though it was shot on film. And there's one other thing I'll show you inside of this effect that makes it a little bit softer like film versus, video has this kind of sharp edges and very crispy detail versus film being a little soft and has these beautiful highlights. So if you want to emulate that, I'll show you in just a moment, but I wanted to apply this thing called overlight. All right, and so overlight is in the universe effects, and it's in here, and it's under, I want to say it's under the stylize category. You scroll down, you should see overlight is right about here. And it ships with its own starting points and presets. There's a few things that you can adjust inside of here. I'll show you. It's pretty easy to use, and it's become one of my favorites. And I'll just show you one thing before I even continue with the overlight itself. I'll show you a raw clip just to give you an idea. And I was going to use this clip just to showcase, you know, I love shooting into the sun, to show you just sometimes you have those blooming highlights naturally, right? And that's something, to be completely honest, you always want to aim to get the stuff in camera. But if you don't get this in camera, and maybe you get it in one shot, but you don't get it in the second, but you like the second shot more, you want to be able to replicate that or add your own version of that. So this is what I call this one the natural overlight, but just to show you that I wasn't just kind of making this up. I'll show you the actual raw clip that I have in here, and this was all shot in the Blackmagic RAW profile of Blackmagic RAW codec. So you can see I play this back. I'm just going to kind of scrub, and you'll see that natural bloom here. And what I'm trying to emulate with this, using the overlight effect, I can get this same effect, but this is actually on my RAW. I didn't just bake it in and show it to you. So just to show you, it's like it's inside of, you know, I'm right now in my camera reel, and even if I scrub this one here, you can see even this one has it. So I'm a big fan of the blooming highlights, and I love to shoot almost into the sun and just diffuse my camera as much as possible. So anyway, here is I have the overlight effect on this clip right here. And you know, when you're working with a wide shot like this and it's already a little bit bright, you probably don't want to use it as much. It's better on those closer shots on when you actually have a little more contrast. Here, this is contrasty, but at the same time, I do have a lot of this sky right here, so it's just kind of washing out my subject, which is not ideal. So you can pick a different style if you want. If you want to have like these circles here, or if I do the corner glow, you have a bunch of different options that you can sort through here, right? Just to kind of give you, you know, somewhat in the ballpark of what you might want. And then another thing is, see how it gives me that slight flicker? So the idea is you have a flicker option here, and I can crank that up to like, let's just crank it up to 80%, right? So then the range of how often it flickers is a little bit more. So you can apply this to, you know, pretty much anything. You can even mask these things. You know, if you're in Premiere, you can see that any effect that you apply has the option of masking, whether you want to do a free form, a ellipse, or somewhat of a square rectangle. So, but the overlight effect, again, use it to taste. I would say whenever you're doing anything stylistic, the number one thing to remember is that use it as a spice. You know, some are more like salt, you know, where you like put a pinch of it and that's just the right amount. You put a little more than a pinch, and then that's just too much. So use these kind of sparingly. You don't want to use them all the time, but they add a little bit of sheen to the work that you do. So and then also, you know, let's say you're working, if you're like here, by the way, I'm cranking up the brightness just to show you, you can even animate this, but the flicker does a lot of that for you. When you just adjust this flicker option here, that will do it'll pulse with this kind of brightness. So, but what I was going to say is, whenever you do this, use it to a certain, you know, to a certain, not all the time, but let's say, for instance, if this is for a film, right? So this is a part of a film, right? Then maybe not on the actual film you go too stylized and too hard on your effects, but maybe for the promos you do. So whenever you're doing any like promos for this, you want to showcase the eye candy. That's your chance to kind of turn this into an art project. When, you know, if you were doing this specifically for the program itself, then you wouldn't go as strong on this. But just know that any of this can be adjusted. I would say the overall adjustment on this is the opacity, which you can also put on an adjustment layer. If you wanted to add an adjustment layer, you could put the effect right here on an adjustment layer, and then you can fade this in, fade this out, you know, just kind of put an adjustment layer across and then make cuts at each one. And there's so many things that you can do with it. So if I'm in here, another thing is when I was just mentioning the opacity, right, being your overall potency of that effect, if you were in the colorista, the option that you'd be looking for is the strength. And same with the looks effect. I'll be covering the looks effect in my sessions tomorrow on dirtying up and kind of gritting up your shots by adding some digital noise to complement the other noise that you might have kicked up by making things look a little too perfect, or all the extra noise. As you're punching up your shot, sometimes you introduce noise. So in here, if something is too much, you can dial this back. All right, and again, that's taking me back to this flat look, and then I can go back up here. And if I were to, I'll show you another example where I crunched it down and I made my footage basically like degraded. Doesn't look so great when you look at it standalone, but then when you add the overlight effect, it makes it sandwiches well. It's a two-piece effect. You don't do one and then leave the other. So this one right here is a little bit kind of this wide angle one is a little bit makes it look a little more washed out. So maybe you do overlight very little on this, and maybe you go a little bit more crunchy on your values in here to make things kind of stand out more. So you can even kind of increase your shadows. Where are we here? Oh, I'll just reset this one. So let me show you one other thing I really love. I'm going to show it on a close-up clip, so then you really can see. In here, it looks a little soft because the simple fact that it's a wide shot. It already looks kind of nice. Doesn't you can see details, but you don't really notice it until you get into a shot like this one. Right, so there is an effect inside of Colorista, right? And let me just show you here on some of my pre-baked stuff. I'll just turn this off. So inside of here, right, this shot, I have a couple of things going on. I'm just going to turn these off and just show you. So I set up Colorista to be, and I like to name these, by the way. You can always click on an effect, choose, right click on it, choose rename, and then kind of just make a set of instructions for yourself, especially if you're going to be stylized. And if you happen to be in the collaborative environment where you're not just, if you're shooting and editing by yourself, I mean, it's good practice to leave yourself notes. But if you don't leave yourself notes, it's not the end of the world. If you're in a collaborative environment and you make a mess and you just do a bunch of homegrown stuff that nobody understands, you're gonna get some phone calls. So with that said, I did this Colorista effect that looks kind of like this, and it's kind of underexposed, very crunched, and the whole idea is that I'm going to add this overlight effect. And the overlight effect is going to complement and kind of sandwiches with my Colorista effect. Now, one thing I want to show you in the Colorista effect that I did that you can set as a preset and just save it as, you can call it skin smoothing, you can call it film softness. You know, I think I might have called it film softness. I left it as skin smoothing, but you can call it like a film softness. It basically, it'll make your footage look nice and soft and retain all the detail. It's pretty awesome. I feel like it's such a tiny thing inside of this massive effect that it does not get enough credit, but I do want to call it out and show you just how great it can be. So if you go over here, it's called pop. And when you think of pop, you don't think of soda, in case you're from the Midwest. You think of basically local contrast. So when something is a not sharp enough clip, maybe it goes in and out of focus. You were doing something that was, you were trying to be wide open and trying to capture something, and it goes in and out of focus with some serious depth of field. maybe you're able to fix that a little bit by introducing local contrast, which is this pop slider here. Now, right now, I'll show you, I have the pop slider set to -60. I'll just set it to 0 and show you the difference. So if you look here, I'm just going to hit and commit that. Now you can see all these details, right? And details on the skin are not necessarily always the desired effect. Sometimes you want to make things look a little bit more dreamy, and you don't want them to look plastic or anything, but it's not a bad idea to kind of do a little bit of concealment there. So you can drag this up, you know, kind of drag your numbers here. If you go this way, now you can see that introduces a lot of, it kind of makes the pores grow, and it's not so great, and it kicks up a lot of dirt on the face. That's really not good. There's a good chance that you'll get some phone calls about that. But for this, I'll go right to a minus 50, right? And you can see the difference, what it did. So just to show you again, go to 0, right? This is the original, and let me just kind of zoom in here. All right, so that's the original, and then I will go here to a I had it at -60, right? So if you look here, I just commit to this, and now it's softened everything, and you can see that it kept all the important parts of the face very sharp, and it just kind of gave me this little dreamy look here. It made things look, you know, again, all the edges here, all the important edges are still sharp and in focus, versus when you're looking at, like, even the hair is in focus. See that? You can even see here on the hair, it's in focus. So when you use the pop effect, feel free to use the pop effect, and just, you know, if that's all you do and that's all you use Colorista for in that one instance, that's not a problem. It's a great little tool inside of a tool to give you this kind of soft look. So that adds to the whole film effect, right? Because 4K video sometimes can be unforgiving as far as how much detail it's giving you. You don't necessarily want that much detail. So again, I'm a big fan of just using the negative pop effect. So that will basically keep things intact and soften the local contrast here, and it pays attention to you know, certain areas that I would call it a smart effect. So anyway, the pop effect, if you just do that, and then you can save it out, right? And then, you know, you do that by just literally right-clicking and choose Save Preset after you've applied it inside of your effect controls. And then I have this one here that I've already made from earlier, and if you look in my descriptor, it says pop slider. I didn't put slider, but that's not a problem. I put slide. Pop slider, I'll just double-click on this effect, and it doesn't say slider, so I'll add an R there. Scale does not matter in this sense. That's if you have something timed out. There's no keyframing on this. If you wanted there to be keyframing, then that would probably matter. But for right now, it doesn't matter. That's just so you can anchor it to the head or the tail as far as timing. Or if you wanted to, you put beginning and end keyframes. They're going to scale based on the size of your clip. So, but yeah, skin smooth, or how about, let's just call it film, right? Or film softness, right? And then I hit OK, and there it is. So now you just have that little tool in your toolkit. You can drag it onto any clip, and it's instantly going to do that. Like, I'll just go over here to this. I'll go to this other clip, and I'll just drag that on. And now if you look in here, oh, let me zoom into there. If you go into here now, you can see that it's applied that softness only and not all the other color correction. So use it as a tool. It's just a nice little piece of the existing effect that's already in place. So if you look, let me just show you here, like with this clip, for example, if you look at it when it's flat versus, let's go over here and I'll show you it right about here. Now I've applied two of these null light factory effects, but for the sake of time, I'm picking the null light factory EZ version, which is the version that ships with Universe. But if you happen to have the VFX suite installed on your machine, then you can actually go in and design your own flares. And it gets pretty intricate, and I mean, you can do some pretty amazing things there, and you can share all these customized effects amongst your team, which is really awesome. That's a whole topic in itself, but for the sake of time, I just want to show you you're not missing a lot by having, except for the designer, all right, by having the EZ version, because you have a lot of these presets are already set up here, and you can go shopping even inside of this effect. You can go shopping for a different effect. So you have different categories, you know, which will give you kind of that J.J. Abrams look with the blue, you know, the anamorphic lenses, and you can go cinematic motion graphics lenses, meaning like all the stuff you'd use for like text and all this kind of stuff, and pushing around all your artwork. And then this one right here is just to mimic the natural light, right? Like for right now, I have it set to this 85 setting, right? And then I can go to a 35 setting. I can also adjust where the flare is. Let me just turn this off and show you. Like the reason why we would do any of this is like to have kind of selective wraparound lighting, I would say, is probably the best description of everything that we're doing in here, is to kind of grade your stuff, but give it this like selective wraparound lighting that looks a little bit more organic and doesn't just look like a piece of stock that you put on top with a blending mode, which is very common. I also used to do that myself. The best thing I would say is now you can do that same effect, but now you can scientifically dial it in and adjust how much flare, what type of lens. So with this, you would choose your flare category. Right now I'm going to choose from the natural light category, and then inside of the natural light category, this is where I select my lens, and I can say like sunny day, and then you can see the sunny day preset. It also did not affect where I placed my light location. And just to show you, I'm going to just zoom out here, and here is my flare or my light, if you guys can see that, right? And inside of here, I have, basically I can move that around, and if I were to move that, you would see there is my flare right there, but that's not as desirable as just the basic, fall off and the basic, I really want the texture of it, but I don't want it to be so intense. It's not like the sun is going to be like kissing my lens, it's going to be it'll be always off in the corner somewhere unless I'm shooting directly in the sun. So that is the light location, right? And then you can also tint the color. You have a little color picker here, and you can tint the color of that to match something on your, within your footage. So if you wanted it to look kind of to match the skin tone here, or if you wanted it to match the background there, which would make more sense, of course. So if you click it once, it just samples the things. You have to click and hold it, and then kind of go to where, then let go of it, and then it samples your color. So once you do this, all right, you can also adjust the scale, all right, and this is the scale of the flare. How much is it going to flare? All right, when you're doing any of this, it's not a bad idea to pull up that comparison view that's inside of your buttons here. If you click the plus for the button editor inside of Premiere, you have this option right here for comparison view, and it just kind of looks like two film strips side by side. One is opaque, the other one looks like it has a hole cut in it. So when you click on this, you have different ways that you can compare, and you have like a reference side where you can scrub the values and just kind of jump around, and then you can use this to kind of emulate, what you want this close-up shot to look like against your, against the previous shot. So if you're showing a lot of light here, then you want to show a lot of light here. And again, while you're doing this, just to show you you can make multiple versions of the same thing. So that's the effect I'm doing right now, right? But what if I were to do this? This is a little bit more subtle. To me, this would mesh a little bit better than this. If the sun was a little bit more bright, or if I were to add more of that overlight effect on it here, then maybe it would be a good idea to pump this up in here. But I have the subtle version, and then I have the version I was just creating right now, which is a little bit more harsh. But there's really, again, this is stylistic. If you wanted to have an opacity slider, the best answer for that is to do this on an adjustment layer. And then you can adjust if that were 100% opacity or if it was less potent of an effect. But you can also just adjust basically the scale of the flare, the brightness of the flare, right? So you can make your light, right? You can make your light further off with bright fall off that lands here. And then that's literally just going to be like scattered wraparound light here. And it just kind of adds a little texture to the background. So there's a lot of little things you can do with just that alone. And honestly, you can sit here and dial in just one shot and just have a lot of fun with it. But for right now, I like the subtle version more than I like this pumped up version. And the difference in doing this versus just going in and going in and slightly overexposing your image or adjusting the highlights and pushing the highlights. I think the difference is you're adding a colored light source to match like the sun or to match a light, or and you can adjust where it is, how it falls off, and now you can kind of, even if I wanted to, I can switch it around and put it on this side, so it lights up the hand less than lighting up this background here. But I wanted it to kind of match the angle of where the sun would be. So you have the sun that would be coming down from here, and then when I get to this tight shot here, now I can see that the sun is tapping just right around here. So, with it off, with it on, it just does a little bit of extra work compared to if you just push the highlights. So, and again, all this stuff that I'm showing you here, it's here's another one that's kind of interesting. I would say, for instance, like, look at this clip. This is what it looks like ahead of time. All right, and it's like it has an interesting feel there. You can see some things are in and out of focus. Nice, field here, and we're kind of walking through this field, and you wanna see and kick up some of this contrast. But also, it's a sunny day. But at this point, we don't really have any flares. There's nothing really interesting. This clip is not as dynamic as it could be. And when you add this stuff, now I can introduce like a little side light here, as though the sun, right, was kicking in from this corner here. And so it kind of gives me this. This is the overbright effect, the overlight effect. I keep calling it overbright. The overlight effect, the universe overlight effect. And you can also, you don't have to use the overlight effect. You can also use no light factory, and then you can make your own light source and then point it exactly where you want it. But feel free to use either one. It's not, there's no it's like no wrong way to eat a Reese's kind of situation. Like, if you want to do any of this stuff and it's stylized, just keep in mind you can do more than one version of Colorista. You can do it in a sense to where you've made like you've degraded your footage, right? And like, for instance, this one here in particular, where is it? Like this one, it pretty much makes the footage look like just super stylized, underexposed and very crunched, right? So there's that. And then when you apply the effect to it, the whole purpose of doing this version of the effect was for use with a heavy overlight. So I'm using the overlight to really kind of fix my image. And the whole point is let me just go frame by frame in case if we have any bandwidth issues playing back. But just to show you, you'll notice that things kind of bloom and you have this nice it's the footage has been softened by the pop, right? And then also you have this blooming highlights that pop up using the overlight effect. So the ideal situation, right, is if you do have a little bit of time, then crunch down your footage, step through to the guided color correction and just crunch your footage down and then apply another effect to it, which would be the overlight, or you can use no light factory. So with that said, just kind of stepping around, you don't want to use this for every single shot. I'm just showing you a sequence of them, but there are times to use this, and I've seen it done a lot in motion graphics, the overlight effect and the no light factory. It's just kind of to give your graphics even a nice organic feel, as though they were being shot with a camera instead of just um, a virtual camera in After Effects. So, but with this shot right here, for example, this you still can see all these details here, and then you get a little bit more of this highlights and a little bit of that bloom, as though it were the sun, or as though I was getting those same flares. See, they pulse about the same. You can adjust inside of here just how much flicker that you have. And just remember, like, see how it says flip light leak? You have a couple of options here. You can make it flip it horizontally, flip it vertically, all right, or both. All right, so for this one, I just chose both, for the sake of simplicity. I kind of like, my light source is over here and the sun was over here, so I kind of kept it right over there, just so just so it kind of stays consistent with the overall timeline here. So, but the ideal situation to be, every now and then, it's a good idea to just get in here, even when you're doing stylized stuff, just get in here and check, just see how things kind of line up, and just make sure that, colors work, and if you see that, maybe something's a little bit too much, maybe you can already tell that, like in this shot, let me turn this off. In this shot, maybe I went too much, I went a little hard with the flare here on the edge. You can back that off, The biggest thing is just give it a shot, try it out. Whenever you're doing anything stylized, let me just zoom in a little bit here. But whenever you're doing anything stylized, it takes a few different attempts before you get something that looks pretty desirable. Otherwise, you're just going to keep, there's tons of presets to get you to a good spot. But if you don't give it a shot, feel free. Again, I am telling you, it's not terrible to dirty up your footage, not necessarily completely degrade your footage for a look, but this is something I would do for like a promo or something. I wouldn't do this necessarily for the exact product, but this would work really well for a promo. This would work really well for, there's so many shots you can probably, I found myself digging up, something that looked like it was out of focus, something that looked like it was just, I have plenty of stuff that I just shoot and I'm like, oh, that looks bad. And then I'm like, you know what? I like the composition on it, but it's a little soft. Why don't I make it artistic? Like, for instance, this shot here is pretty soft. Like, this is the raw version of that. And it's just literally these birds. I captured the tail end of these birds scattering. But I've shot these birds in the field so many times. So, but I like the way that this looks, but it's out of focus. So if you stylize it, right? When I stylize it, now if you look at it over here, it has a nice look to it. So, basically when you think something is throwaway footage, it's not necessarily throwaway footage. There's a ton of stuff that you can cut, crop in, maybe the composition wasn't perfect. You can go in there and you can clean up these things and you can use them for style. And I've literally picked through old B-roll and made something that didn't look so incredible as shot, and just kind of pumped up areas and then relit it using overlight or using the no light factory plugin, and I'm able to get some pretty interesting results. And it's just a quick cutaway, or it's just a texture shot. So don't think that if you are the person that shoots, right? Don't think that if you shot something and it doesn't quite look so great, it's not a bad idea to give it a try. Just messing around with it and seeing what you can do by relighting it and rebalancing that shot. If you didn't get it in camera, it's totally fine. Use the textures and use the overlight effect, the no light factor, the colorista. And again, just keep in mind, you know, all this stuff, use it to taste. If you do too much of it, you can really get you don't want it to be so stylized that it takes away from the story, or the visuals are just too much, they're too saturated, and you know, that's not the story you're trying to tell. So, you know, in the documentary world, we now live in a world actually of cinematic documentary, and people they love to make pretty images that actually tell real people stories, which I think is amazing. And if you look on Netflix or Hulu, or you know, they're just loaded with these shows that are full of stylized documentaries, and there's so many things that you can do to either, you know, what you would consider just regular video style footage, especially if you shot something, if you shot a pickup shot with your phone, you know, and you don't necessarily have an iPhone 11 Pro, or, you know, the latest, greatest, you know, Samsung Galaxy, or, you know, now they have 8K phones. Like, utilize that. If you want to do a quick pickup shot and it fills the frame, and it might be a little bit harsher, you can see, you know, some of the you know, a little too much detail, or it's just, you know, it's a cell phone video, so it already looks like a cell phone video. You can fix that. Yes, you can fix that in post, and you can go and basically dial back the pop effect, and then it gives you a little bit more to work with. So I'm encouraging you to feel free to dirty up your footage. Feel free to do a little bit of degrading with purpose, though. Don't just push your sliders too much to where you're not making, you know, if you're not making something that looks good, then keep trying. But the ideal situation is maybe balance your shot, and then with the idea of using and combining effects such as an overlight and the colorista effect, you can also always go back in, and there's an option for, I'll just show you here in the effect controls, there's an option for, let's go to colorista, and you have your strength here, right, at 80%, especially the strength of that effect. But you can go in here and you can adjust. See how it says exposure? I'm at this 20%. I mean, you can underexpose it a little bit if you want. And when you underexpose that shot, now guess what? I can go back to the overlight, right? And I will kick up the overlight, or maybe adjust this brightness on the overlight. So now it gives me an even more different effect. Like, so it'll, you just use the light for texture, use the light for to fill in some of these areas, and then also it gives you that organic kind of situation, like as though it was shot on a more expensive camera, on a better lens. You know, I know people who have shot with the kit lens, and I never knew that, you know, that the footage was shot with the kit lens, meaning the lens that comes bundled with whatever camera you buy, whether it's a DSLR or Blackmagic, or, you know, if you have a red camera. Red cameras don't come with kit lenses, to my knowledge, though. But you know, for the simple fact of maybe saving some of these shots, or not being afraid to utilize whatever means you have, you can make these things all look pretty nice, and you can make things look cinematic. So if for example you saw your shot was a little dark, or if anything was shot with like a GoPro or a phone or anything like that, or you just repurposing. Another thing is, if you're repurposing 709 footage, all right, somebody gave you an edited piece, and then you're just literally grabbing bits of that 709 footage, right? You can run it through the colorista effect, and then do the same thing like I showed you before. just get in there and like for instance, let me just show you, I'm gonna show you two more things here. So we got about 10 minutes left. I'll show you this shrink ray effect in just a second. But if you add a clip, just run it through, and then that first part of the colorista effect, right? When you do the guided color correction, when you're here, right? If you don't know, that's totally fine. You can start here. And is this wrong? There's nothing wrong about this. If you're doing it for style, then you can kind of just eye it and see what you like, right? And you reverse engineer the idea of what you're actually doing to balance this color. You're going to, you're basically rolling the dough before you bake these cookies. So if you want this to be a little bit more of a chunky cookie versus just a really flat or chewy cookie, you can pick how you want to roll this out. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, with that said, just step through this until when you get to the final stages here and you go and you read what you've done thus far. Then from there, now you can add the overlight effect. Now you can design your own lighting in the shot after the fact. So feel free to play around and use the guided color correction to take maybe a piece of footage, even if in your work you repurpose old film stuff, like if you took stuff from old movies and now you want to kind of recreate the way it looks, or it's just too crunched, or I mean, how often a lot of people end up ripping stuff down from the internet, some in whatever site, and then they have to repurpose that package. So whenever you have something that looks a little crunched, you can go and use the guided color correction to kind of flatten it out, and it takes you step by step. So that's one of the major pluses of that tool. So anyhow, I want to show you these last two things, and bear with me on these black bars here. So if I have just a very static establishing shot, and there's so many times where I have to shoot an establishing shot, but I'm not really excited about it, just for the simple fact that, yeah, okay, it's a static shot on a tripod. Most of the time you at least want to capture that establishing wide shot. It's probably the least fun thing to shoot. You just get out there and throw your tripod down, find a decent angle, and get it once, twice, move in closer, move out wider, whatever works, whatever your style is. And when it seems to be a little bit boring, right, this is when you can jazz it up. So I'll show you here. Let me pull up my universe dashboard. It's on my other page here. I'm going to select this clip, right? And I already have shrink ray applied. So let me turn on shrink ray again. And shrink ray is going to create basically like a little bit of blur, and it's to emulate the idea of a tilt shift lens and make things look as though they were tiny. But it's not necessarily always, you don't have to always use it for that particular example. So I've applied it, and then I'm actually going to go in here. Let me just go to choose preset. So I'll go to choose preset, and I will twirl this down first, and then do choose a preset. And when I did choose a preset, sorry, let me move this back here on the screen. When I did choose a preset, you'll see here are my options, and let me just click on them, and I'll click apply preset, and you get the thing, the little overlay that pops up says it's been applied. You can see it in here. Maybe that's a bit much. How about this one here, or deep, or sideways, right? Just think of these as starting points. Here's subtle, very subtle. It looks pretty nice. It gives you a little bit of fall off here, right? And it kind of emulates just this like streak, right? If you have a shot with a tilt shift lens, you know that you're gonna have just like a streak of focus instead of like the full circular, with the outer part being out of focus. You have just a streak of focus, which is pretty interesting, especially when you do anything here with these wide angle shots. So, you can use these just as starting points. And if you look at this, it also brightened up my image just a little bit. So that's that's what the presets look like. You can also make your own presets as well. But let me just drag this and put this on the other side here. So anyway, I can jazz that shot up. Another thing, I'm not going to show you it on this clip in particular because I have that black edge and that's just going to get in the way. But there's this option right here for camera shake. Maybe sometimes you need to add some camera shake. They use this on the recent Terminator film just to kind of break up the perfectly smooth dolly shots or the perfectly smooth, you know, Steadicam shots, right? So things were shot way too well, and now you got to gritty it up a little bit. So, you know, add some camera shake back in. It's not a bad idea sometimes. So to make your clips a little bit more diverse than just popping a tripod there, getting the wide angle, and now you're like, oh, I love everything except I hate that very first shot, which is just a static shot on a tripod. There's so many ways you can work around with this. And if you look here on this option here, you have these for shrink ray, you have these two little points, right? And these are kind of these are your patch controls, and you can add basically that this area is blurred and this area is blurred. You can control just how much things are blurred. You can add some, looks like you can pump up the gain a little bit, see? And now that's what's making things kind of highlight and blow things out a little bit. And guess what? Every single one of these all have the stopwatch next to them. So you could jazz it up and kind of keyframe any of these things, and maybe you keyframe the focus, and you make that boring, static, establishing shot into something that looks a little bit more desirable. And you can always do this to taste. You do not have to do this to where it's just so many layers of sheen. It's too much icing for the cake, and it kind of defeats the purpose. So I did want to talk quickly just about any follow-up if you're interested in any of this, or even carrying on with any other subjects. If there's something you'd like to dial into for you, your group, just email us right here, training@redgiant.com, and basically we'll be able to, you know, either pair you up with myself or a few other different people amongst this team, and help you dial into whichever products you're using Red Giant wise, and give you kind of some creative recipes or even just the technical assistance, and give you that overview on how to use the tools to the best possible method. So I hope you all got something from this. If you have any questions, I would say feel free to email here at training@redgiant.com. Again, look forward to hearing from you when we have customized sessions. They will be there'll be a two-way chat, and we'll be able to talk back and forth. And if you had a question, we can do the questions on the fly. That's the benefit of doing the customized sessions. So that was a really fast 1 hour. I hope you got something out of this. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to talking to you later. I also have 2 more sessions this week, one tomorrow on just dirty and gritting up your footage using the Magic Bullet tools, and another one just on doing some basic motion graphics that are subtle effects, so you don't take away from the story, and you don't necessarily have to jump into After Effects to do these motion graphics. So anyway, thank you for your time. The recording will be available after I finish this session, and look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to reach out, training@redgiant.com. Thank you.